Welcome to UCF Nightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information. Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fagley coming to you from the 1148 Studios, episode number 29.
This is Trace Trelko. Hello, everyone. National Signing Day has come. It's gone, but there's still plenty to talk about.
We are going to have Brandon Helwig on later on to talk about National Signing Day and then the recruits, basically. He is the publisher of UCFsports.com. We're going to have part 2 with Kyle Israel, and we're going to talk a little bit about basketball. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do for our baseball season coming up. We're going to talk a little bit about Soccer National Signing Day, and yeah, so we did a thing on YouTube for National Signing Day for football the other day, and we got a great amount of support for that, and a lot of people watched it, and I really appreciate you guys watching that.
And the beauty of that, the behind the scenes for folks who wonder how all of this podcast magic comes to be, is that on National Signing Day, I literally texted you, Andrew, and said, we really need to do something today. We can't wait until the weekly podcast, and thus was born a television program or a YouTube. I don't know the right language for
YouTube,
it, but
not
a great response. Great response to it.
I think people liked it, and all the comments that I've got have been positive, and judging by the number of views, people liked it and all that. So we appreciate you checking that out. We are going to do lots and lots more with that. It's not going to become the major thing. It's going to be a supplemental thing, and it is called UCF Nightline Podcast Overtime.
Overtime.
Yep.
Also, what was good on the website is that Troy had a great breakdown of the recruits. It's really worth a read. You can find it on UCFNightlinePodcast.com. Good read, good context, more analysis on UCF signing class.
Yeah, it's right on the front page. It says something like National Signing Day Review or Class of 2015 Review or something like that, but it's right there under top stories.
I felt like I had studied and knew what we were talking about, but after reading his article, I felt like I had more context. Plus, he threw in some humorous asides, and it's a good read.
Troy's a good guy. He's a great writer, I think, and it's always creative and, interesting. He makes it interesting and funny and all that stuff, and we will have Troy back on at some point here soon as well, so I think definitely one of his strengths is writing, so I'm glad to have him at least with us as a writer. I appreciate that from him. All right, so I think at this point we will go right into the interview with Brandon Helwig. All right, we are here with Brandon Helwig, publisher of UCFsports.com. Brandon, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're awesome. National Signing Day was just the other day, a highly touted class for UCF. What are your initial thoughts about the class?
Well, the initial thoughts are obviously it's a little bit smaller. That's the biggest thing that jumps at you right off the bat. As Coach O'Leary explained the other day on signing day, this is the final year of the NCAA limitations from the sanctions that were handed down a few years ago. Initially, it was believed that they would have been able to count back the 2012 class into 3 years, which would have included 12, 13, and 14. I mean, this year, you would have thought they should have been able to sign a bigger class, closer to 25, but apparently, no, that was not correct. So this will be really the fourth straight year UCF will sign less than 20 players. So that kind of jumps out, and you see signing day halls of some of these other teams signing 25. In some cases, teams sign more than 25 players. So it's low on numbers, but when you look at it, there's, if any UCF fan knows, there's two positions on the team that lose a lot of major contributors, and that would be wide receiver and secondary. They did address those needs a little bit, and we're going to break down more of the individual signings in a minute, but they did fill those needs a little bit by signing 3 wide receivers and 2 defensive backs.
That basically was a 5 scholarship takeaway, basically, right?
Yeah, well, how O'Leary described it, he was calling it 5-5-5, which means a reduction of 5 scholarships you can give out per year, which typically the NCAA limit to give out on a yearly basis is 25. UCF is limited to giving out 20, which they really haven't hit the past 3 years. The number that was announced on Wednesday was 17. That includes one player, running back Taj McGowan, that's already enrolled. But, when they do their signing day presentation in the press conference, UCF tried to, I think it was kind of more to, just kind of make it look like it wasn't as small as it was. They did say they are trying to count a walk-on transfer. Well, he walked on last year. I mean, he was a scholarship player, a linebacker named Dimitri Brim. He was one of UCF, honestly, one of their top targets, I believe, back in the 2012 class out of Lakeland Victory Christian. He had been committed to Virginia for a while, came to several UCF games that season. UCF tried to get him to flip, but were unsuccessful. He went to Virginia for a couple years and transferred to UCF this past August. And he, they didn't have a scholarship available for him, so he basically walked on, but, he kind of walked on with it. It was implied, everyone knew that he was better than just a typical walk-on, and Coach said they were going to put him on scholarship beginning this spring. So we sort of included him to the presentation, and matter of fact, he's probably the favorite to the number one middle linebacker entering this spring. The other guy that UCF was including with their press conference was Michael Rogers, a defensive back prospect signed in last year's 2014 class. He did not academically qualify and has been working towards attaining qualification this fall and early part of this year. He's still not cleared, but they hope they'll have some good news on him within the next couple weeks. So if you include those two guys, it was a class of 19, but still, it's really the fourth straight year they're going to sign. They're going to bring in a class of less than 20 players.
Two questions for you, Brandon. Any cause for concern with that reduction, that at some point it would catch up with UCF? And the second question is, have we reaped the benefits of the Fiesta Bowl win, do you feel, in the subsequent recruiting classes?
It is something that has crossed my mind, when every year, and you look, when you look at a recruiting class and you go back and look at classes of the past, 10 years or whatever, there's always players that pan out. There's guys maybe that, were more highly rated and maybe they don't pan out. Maybe some of the lower rated guys might be the stars. And then there's always guys that, either don't play, they leave the program, they transfer. So, you're never going to, look at a recruiting class and say, every player made an impact. It's just the way it is. There's so many positions available and so many players can play at one time. So when you have smaller classes, there's no room for error. And, when you can sign 25, you kind of pretty much know that probably 10 or more aren't going to do much at all, But so when you sign smaller classes, you can't afford to have misses, whether it's talent or you're making wrong judgments on guys' work ethic or what have you. You do get a little concerned. I mean, I'm sure if UCF had their choice, they would have liked to have assigned larger classes that had more scholarship at their disposal the last few years, but in UCF's defense, it hasn't caught up with them. We'll see what happens this year, with having to replace a lot of players who are graduating, but you certainly can't argue with the results. I think Coach O'Leary, the number he was kind of throwing out, that they've averaged 9.4 wins the last 5 years. So, you really can't argue with the results, but in months ahead, we'll kind of look more and preview, this upcoming team, 2015. You would have liked to have more receivers maybe in the program. Maybe you would have liked to have signed more wide receivers last year, so you maybe had a couple more guys redshirting, might be ready to play. So time will tell. Right now it hasn't caught up with them, but time will tell on that. As far as the second question about Fiesta Bowl bump and everything else, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if it made a major difference or not. UCF, I think out of the 17, I think maybe 10 or 11 had committed by the end of this past summer. Whether or not that made the difference in them choosing UCF, I don't know. This class is pretty much kind of the same kind of class as UCF has been signing the past few years. They get some pretty good guys with good offers. Maybe they'll get 1 or 2 4-star type players, which they did, this year, having a 4-star and wide receiver Tristan Payton. It certainly, the Fiesta Bowl impact, it certainly didn't hurt things. I don't know if you can say, oh, wow, their recruiting class is so much better because of the Fiesta Bowl. It certainly seems, similar to the classes of the past couple of years.
Speaking of Tristan Payton, he was our 4-star this year, a big wide receiver coming out of Jacksonville. What do you think about him?
Kind of came out of nowhere a little bit in terms of his recruitment and everything else. Had been committed early on to Florida and had been switched his commitment to USC this past summer. It kind of that was sort of the position as you went into the recruiting season. You know, UCF needs receivers. They need receivers. They only had one receiver committed for the longest time, that being Cameron Stewart, who was the first guy to actually commit last April. So as we got into December and January, there was no other receivers committed, and I guess news came out early in January that, you know, Tristan Payton was going to visit UCF, and, you know, you just kind of wondered if he just, you know, wanted to take some trips, which a lot of guys do. They'll be committed to a school since the summer, and they still want to take their 5 visits, and you just, you know, are they really solid? Are they taking visits for fun? You know, you just don't know. So kind of an interesting thing how that kind of worked out. He did visit, I guess it was a couple weeks ago now, really the last big visit weekend UCF had, the weekend of January 23rd, and, you know, committed on the visit. Actually decommitted from USC just on that Friday as he was making it down for his visit. So, you know, it was a guy that coach, Sean Beckton, wide receivers coach, obviously has, you know, recruits Jacksonville and has ties to that high school. UCF has a couple of, you know, players that played at First Coast, Jacksonville First Coast on the team currently. So I'm sure that played a role as well. And, you know, talking to Coach Beckton the other day on signing day, you know, he you know, pretty much said that appealed to him. I mean, you can sell it. You got 5 receivers leaving. You know, one of those is, you know, a junior who was leaving early, and Brashad Perriman declaring for the NFL draft. So, you know, you want to play, you want to, you know, potentially make it to the next level, you've got to play. And at UCF, I mean, just looking at the numbers coming back, I mean, there's a great chance, really. Freshmen are going to have to play next year at wide receiver, so that definitely appealed to him. You know, he's kind of like, you know, from talking to Coach Beckton, and I still need to go back and kind of review my tape with him and do that interview. But I'm thinking the guy he compared him to, like Hunter was asking him to compare him, I'm pretty sure that was the one he sort of compared to kind of like a young Wernell Hall.
If you had to make a guess here in February, we see Tristan Payton on the field, suited up, playing Game 1 for the Knights this coming football season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with just looking at numbers, UCF returns only 3 scholarship receivers, you know, the most experienced of which is Jordan Akins, who, you know, kind of greatly fell into UCF's lap last spring when, you know, he retired from minor league baseball, and you know, they had Taylor Oldham as the other one, and Traquan Smith, redshirted. So there's only 3 scholarship receivers returning, and you're going to add Chris Davis, who's enrolled, who was a 2014 signee, just is enrolling, and then it's just the guys coming in, recruits, and you're going to travel with 7 or 8, and, you know, in all honesty, you're probably going to, you know, 4 or 5 of those are going to be prominent receivers. So just look at the numbers. I mean, he's going to have to, as long as everything's good and he's qualified and enrolled. I mean, I think all of these guys are going to be playing this year.
What do you think about Cameron Stewart?
Oh, he was the first. You know, I always remember the first commitment. I guess it was last April. You know, he's kind of he's a taller. He's one of the taller. Oh, both him and Darren Wilson, the 2 other receivers, are both in that 6'2", 6'3" range. You know, kind of in that, you know, Perryman size a little bit. I think Perryman might have been more like around 6'3", close to 6'3". But yeah, you know, you should kind of had to. You know, when you get someone committed early, it's just longer. You've got to try to hold off or hold people off of him. And in Nebraska, recruited him pretty strongly. And at the end of the day, he stuck with UCF.
It seems like UCF is starting to get more involved with some of these players that were talking to much larger schools. I mean, USC, and then this guy, Nebraska, tried to flip him. I mean, has that always been going on for UCF? Or
yeah,
is that...
I mean, you know, for the most, I mean, I think it kind of depends. Obviously, there's guys some years that, you know, for some reason, you know, UCF is sometimes one of the primary schools on them, and then obviously there's players where everyone's recruiting. So, you know, I don't know if it was necessarily any different this year, although it does seem that there are some schools out there that just kind of monitor how UCF offers players, and they just kind of, you know, piggyback what they do, because they know how George O'Leary, they know his evaluation system for recruiting and what he looks at, and, you know, evaluating and doing their due diligence on, you know, the other things other than football, you know, character, academics, what have you. So it always seems like, and it's Nebraska. Nebraska a year ago was trying to appeal for a couple of UCF commitments. Like, they did actually succeed in one of them. Cedric King, a defensive end who flipped before signing day, but they also were trying to get another defensive lineman that UCF had committed last year, Jemias Pittman, but they were unsuccessful. Obviously, Pittman said with UCF had a pretty good true freshman season this past year. So that's been happening a little bit. You kind of see that with a few programs, always kind of coming after the UCF commits.
And some UCF fans were concerned with the change in coaches, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, that it would create a little upheaval in the recruiting process. It seems like that was not a negative factor at all.
Not really. I mean, you always kind of wonder, because you see a guy like Tyson Summers, and he actually really, last year's class, he seemed like he recruited half the class, a bunch of guys from South Georgia, especially in the 2014 class that have commits this year. You just kind of wondered, obviously you need to try to replace the coaches that left with, maybe younger guys, better recruiters, guys that, can go get you some players. And, honestly, if you stand back and look at it, I think, I don't know if Chuck Bresnahan will be a better recruiter than Tyson Summers. The jury really afraid it was still out on Tyson Summers as a defensive coordinator, just from a recruiting aspect. I don't know if Bresnahan will be a better recruiter than Summers, but when you look at some of the other positions, I think Travis Fisher is going to be a fantastic recruiter. You got a guy that not only is a UCF alum, played, 5, 6 years, 7 years in the NFL, played at the highest level. He can walk into living rooms in high schools and talk to guys, and he knows what it takes. He wasn't just a guy who played a year on a practice squad. He actually was a star in the NFL. So I think when it's said and done, I think UCF probably got an upgrade when you look at maybe comparing Travis Fisher to a Kurt Callahan as far as a recruiting standpoint. Time will tell. We don't really know that right away, but I think UCF, with the coaches that they did hire, did get at least a couple solid recruiters. I think Andrew Thacker, the other one I should have mentioned, he's going to be coaching safeties. He's got a lot of ties here at Georgia and some other places. I think he's going to end up being a solid recruiter as well. Coach Zoe, the defensive line coach, he pretty much recruited all the Louisiana and Texas recruits. The only one who really wasn't personally involved in with the quarterback, Bo Schneider, because that was kind of a different kind of deal. Actually, Bo Schneider actually recruited UCF more so, and so Brent Key kind of took the lead on that one. But as far as everyone else in Louisiana and Texas, that was Coach Zoe. And Coach Zoe, he's been around. He coached at UCF more than 10 years ago. On the old staff, really pre-O'Leary staff, Coach Kruzek's staff, and returned to the staff a couple of years ago. He's coached at Tulane, and he's from Texas originally. So he's got a lot of ties to some of those cities: Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Baton Rouge. So he's recruited those high schools for a long time at all the places he's been. So, I'm sure if I got out to admit it, why there are more out-of-state commits than Florida commits, and part of that is because some of the coaches you have on staff, frankly, they don't really have strong ties to Florida. When you look at Coach Zoe and Coach Alan Mogers, the O-line coach, maybe their base sometimes is somewhere else, and that's kind of, I think, the reason why you look at the state breakdown and, you see maybe, more guys from other states than signees in Florida.
We did a YouTube edition overtime of the Nightline podcast on signing day, and that was one of the questions we received from a listener asking if there was any cause for concern that we seem to be doing better recruiting out of state. We're not keeping Florida kids or those local kids home. What's your assessment of that, covering the program as many years as you have?
Well, with Orlando, it's just always a crapshoot, and you're dealing with guys for the most part. There's not really a great tradition of, although there have been, the Brandon Marshalls, Mike Walkers, et cetera, there have been, local players, local stars that have signed with UCF. For the most part, the best players in Orlando always go out of state or just out of town. And you got young guys, they've grown up in Orlando, they just want to get away. They want to get on their own. They want to experience something different. So you're always fighting that. And, as far as this year, like I said a second ago, I think it's just for some of the coaches, like Tyson Summers, who really recruited, for the staff up until the beginning of January, really, or into December. His base was Georgia, South Georgia. So, that's why kind of UCF had a few recruits from there. And, Coach Zoe has ties to Texas, Louisiana, Coach Mogers to the Northeast. And it's just, other than Kurt Callahan, who really couldn't close the deal on prospects from the Tampa Bay area, you really couldn't say that, an assistant coach, frankly, has great ties to anywhere within Florida. Maybe hopefully that'll be changed, and, Travis Fisher is going to, recruit in state, and, it's not that UCF it's not like they ignore players within Florida. If you go back and look and, some of the first guys that get offers, maybe this time a year ago, springtime, March, April time frame, you go and look, certainly targeted guys within Florida. But when those guys don't want to commit, you got to get players somewhere. And sometimes it's the guys that, you interview the guys from New Jersey or what have you, and, maybe, the fact that they're getting offered by a school in Florida is really appealing to them. And then they come down on a visit and it's like, oh my gosh, there's palm trees and there's sunshine and stuff that you take for granted if you grew up in Florida. I mean, you don't think twice about that. But when you're coming down from, Pennsylvania or maybe even in Texas or somewhere else, it's kind of, like a different vibe, and they fall in love with that. So I think that kind of plays into it too. But yeah, it wasn't by design to have a class, breakdown like that. You go back, like I said, you go back and look. I'm sure there's guys he would have loved to have within Florida. It just kind of worked out that way. I would imagine that trend will change this upcoming year, but we'll have to just wait and see what happens. And
now we're going to have a beach club in the middle of the stadium.
Yeah, that actually, if it was just a random, East Side club, premium booster area, if they didn't have that theming for it, it would not have received the publicity that it did. It was kind of funny. I think it was a blizzard going on in the Northeast that day when the news came out, and slow news day or whatever it was. It seems like it got picked up by outlets. It certainly created a little bit of buzz.
In fairness, though, a lot of negative headlines.
I don't know if I'd say a lot. I think there's some. I mean, there's some people being kind of sarcastic about it, but I wouldn't associate a negative headline. A couple people made fun of it, but for the most part, I'd say it was mostly it was more positive than negative, in my opinion.
What's your personal opinion about this?
Well, I'd like to see the finished product. I don't really have an issue with the theming, and it's not as some of the UCF administration people say. It's not them just sitting in a room coming up with designs for a beach club. This is a company, the Nassau company, that is world renowned for theming. I mean, they were the Harry Potter experience at Universal Orlando, Legoland, Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. So if they're putting together a beach team, I'm going to have to trust that they've got a pretty good track record. So I am curious to how that's going to play out and how that's going to look. The early returns, just, fans on message boards talking about their figure-outs, making their seat selections. It looks like it's wildly popular. Talking to some of the UCF people, they're pretty confident it's going to sell out. So I think it's going to do what it was intended to do, is create another premium product where UCF can hopefully generate some additional revenue and just kind of change the look of the stadium. It's just where they're putting the club. That was the one area.
That was going to be my next question of what you thought about that.
It was as far as where it is?
Yes. What do you
if you would have asked me a few weeks ago, I would have been, if you could choose to put it wherever you want to put it, I was thinking, put it in the north end zone, which is always one of the toughest areas to sell out and everything else. But, I mean, it's in that area for a reason. It's in there because it's going to be cheaper with where it's located. There's already an elevator, an operational elevator that keeps the cost low. You don't have to construct a new elevator. And also, if they want to make it a premium area, premium product, you can't really have a premium club/suite that's in the end zone. I mean, you could, but what the price they want to charge, which is $900 per seat, you need to have 50-yard line views, which is I don't know if they could charge $900 for an upper end zone club. So for what they want to do, they're looking to generate revenue, and the American TV contract being what it is, and kind of trying to keep up with Power 5 and having to pay, stipends, cost of attendance, and a lot more costs are going to be coming along. They need to try to generate revenue wherever they can, and putting it there gives them a better chance for increasing revenue. So to that end, it is where it should be.
So, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We don't need to know about your fun-filled weekend in the City of Sin, but we hope you'll click the ad on our website. It's right there to the left, the one that screams you have to save up to 50% off your next trip to Vegas. Just click on the ad and we promise never to talk about what happened in Vegas.
What's up, Night fans? This is Jeff Sharon from Sports Talk Florida, and you're listening to the Nightline Podcast.
All right, that does it for part one of Brandon Helwig's interview this week. Brandon is such a great guest because he has so much information to give and does such a great job at UCFsports.com that every time that we have him on, we pretty much have to split him in half there and do one this week, one next week, because there's so much information that we can get out with him. And thank you very much, Brandon. We appreciate it.
Well, he heads up the premier site for UCF Sports News with the message boards, all the content that he has, and he has a lot more insights on recruiting and signing day and more overall impressions of UCF athletics. So more of Brandon in part 2 next week. This week, we have the follow-up, our part 2, your part 2, with former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel, listening to us right now, a world away in Poland, where he is playing football, continuing his career. Very interesting, his observations on UCF's current quarterback situation, and you caught up with him recently.
Going back to the Knights here a little bit, Knight fans won't forget about you being behind the center for the opening of Bright House Network Stadium. What were your memories of that thriller versus Texas back in the day?
Well, I remember that it was scorching hot, extremely, extremely hot, and I know that the water fountains didn't work for the fans in the stadium, or there were no water fountains and they ran out of water. That was just a side note that always kind of, I think, is fairly funny. But for me, the thing that really is singed into my brain is the sound that I heard when Coach O'Leary was just about to have our pregame talk about 4 to 5 minutes before we ran out of the tunnel for the first time ever in that stadium. You had never really known what that metal bleacher was going to provide as far as sound. And when you're sitting there in the locker room directly under the student section, it was so loud, and the sound that came from the stomping of the students' feet was something that I will never forget. So when people ask me that question, yes, I remember the game, and I'll go into that in a little bit, but the sound of the student section on top of that locker room is like anything, unlike anything I've still heard to this day.
It gives me chills just hearing about it, to be honest with you. It gives me goosebumps. I'm sure that it's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's not something that was just for that game. It's something that happens still every week that we play in that stadium when we have a good crowd. But you just didn't know what to expect at the time, obviously. And so to have heard that and having been working so hard all the way through the summer and fall practice in the anticipation of that game, and just coming off a huge win up at North Carolina State, you know, that you were kind of anticipating what this thing would feel like, and it surpassed all the expectations that I had.
UCF football has come a long ways since then, but you kind of were one of the players to usher that in. What do you think about what's going on now and where they've come from even from that point?
Oh, I mean, it's just been really remarkable. I think when you look back at 2004, my first season, we were 0-11. We were playing 18 or 19 true freshmen. And, you know, I had a couple other offers out of high school, and it really came down to Florida State, Mississippi State, or Penn State for me, and UCF. And Coach O'Leary's vision of where he wanted the program to go, it was the selling point, because what did we have to offer at that point in time? We had a pretty new Wayne Dench. We were still playing at that time in the crappy Citrus Bowl downtown. The fan support was minimal at best. Like I said, you had your core 15,000 fans at that period of time. But you had this kind of feeling that the school was just about to explode. Educationally, the campus itself, the athletics program, it was like we're right on that brink. And then bringing Coach O'Leary in with his reputation in regards to winning football games at Georgia Tech and being back at Syracuse and with the Minnesota Vikings and all the coaches that he had brought with him along the way, kind of had this anticipation about where this could potentially go. And so we really, really bought into that vision, 2004, 2005, and 2006. To see us win that championship in 2007, Coach O'Leary told me, in 10 years you're going to come back to help christen a new stadium. Well, this is 10 years. This past year was 10 years from when I signed my scholarship, and we did it in 4. So to think of the timeline and what Coach O'Leary has done, there were some rough times. I know the fan base for a period of time was very hard on Coach O'Leary. Many people wanted him fired, but he is somebody that has seriously stayed true to what he was telling us players back in 2004, the vision that he had, and he hasn't wavered from that one bit. And I think that when you see a guy like Coach O'Leary do that, and the trust that Dr. Hitt and Todd Stansberry, Keith Tribble, and the other athletic director before that, the vision they've had with Coach O'Leary this whole time and staying true to what he wanted to do, to see us be and have the success that we've had over the past 4 to 5 years, winning 10 games, I think 3 out of 4 seasons or 3 out of 5 seasons, and winning the Fiesta Bowl in dramatic fashion against a team that was very good in Baylor. And even some of the ups and downs that we had this year, you can tell that the program is just at another level than it was. And certainly when I think back to games in 2004, 2005, when we had, a measly 17,000, 18,000 people in the Citrus Bowl, or playing in front of a fan base of literally like 700 people at Tulane in the Superdome, where 700 people, it's like practice.
Looks like 4.
Right. So I think that he's done such a remarkable job, and the fan base, I think, has done such a remarkable job of buying into that vision now as well, because it was a little iffy there for a while. And when you mentioned that you moved here in 2010, you were kind of right on that cusp of seeing where this could explode to. And I think we're there now, and now we just have to be able to sustain that, which is the hardest thing to do. I mean, you look at South Florida, they were number 2 in 2007, ranked number 2 in the country, and where have they gone? There's a lot of programs that can't sustain, and I think that's got to be the goal and the vision for the future.
Yeah, and I think that that's very possible here. The fans really need to get behind it, though, and be there for every single game, no matter who they're playing. And that's a big deal to players, and I don't think a lot of fans realize how big of a deal it is. When I ask you what was your biggest remembrance of that, it was the sound of the fans, and that's huge. So what do you think about Justin Holman?
Well, he's got one heck of an arm.
He does.
I know that much. I haven't been able to be around Justin too much. I spent a lot of time with Blake. I spent a lot of time with Brett Hodges and Rob Calabrese and those guys back when I was a little bit more involved and had the time to be involved before I moved out of the country, but I hadn't been back around the program. So I'm going to have to give you my perspective from what I've seen in person at a game and television. I think that he's got incredible arm talent, a guy that certainly has the arm strength to play at the next level. It's sometimes difficult, I think, when you are the guy following a Blake Bortles.
Absolutely.
You're the guy. A lot of people don't realize how much pressure is involved with being the next guy in line to a guy like Blake Bortles, who goes number 3 overall in the NFL draft. Not to mention that Coach is very interesting and smart with quarterbacks. He makes it very difficult, and he treats the position like every other position on the field. If you're not good, if you're not playing well, he's going to be out of the game. I don't necessarily agree with the way that he does that, but sometimes it resonates with players. And you look at Justin Holman, he wasn't the starter going into Penn State, and he came in and rebounded in the second half of that game and really gave us a chance to win that football game. Some of the things that he's done over the season, and he's still a young player. He was only a true sophomore this year, and I think that he's a guy that can take us to a great season in the next 2 years. But he's just got to work, in my opinion, from a critical perspective, which I don't like to be because many people have been critical to me over the years. You heard all the commentators say all year, he's got to take something off and add a little touch to his passing game. And that's really crucial because you don't have to fire every ball in there. You can really take a lot off the ball by anticipating where you're going to throw the ball based on coverage, based on your read. And I think that is something that definitely has to come with time. And so what he's done so far, I think, is really good. What he did this season was really good for a first-year player. But he's got so much more to show, I think, and so much more to prove. And you'll see that maturation process naturally with Justin. And there's some really good players behind him. They're going to continue to push him. I don't think it's never really one guy's job unless you're like a Blake Bortles. Coach is always providing competition and pushing you. And I think that you're going to see some of these younger guys. I think Bo Schneider coming out of Texas is a really good quarterback. We
have some pretty good signal callers in the mix at quarterback. Is UCF becoming maybe a quarterback U?
I think that when we changed offenses back in 2009 with Coach Taff and what he did, because we were strictly pro style for most of my career, which for quarterbacks can be very difficult. It looks very bland to the naked eye, but when you're talking about audibles and checks and getting into the right plays at the line of scrimmage, it's very complex. But with what Coach Taff has done, spreading the football around and throwing more of a screen passing game and then taking shots down the field, quarterbacks want to be in those type of offenses. And what quarterbacks really want to do is throw to really good wide receivers. So I think there's a lot of great things about being a quarterback at UCF. The weather being one of them. You're not playing up in frigid temperatures, like some of these Big Ten schools. I think that's valuable. And, what Blake Bortles did for the program nationally, I don't know if we get a Tyler Harris. I don't know if we get a Bo Schneider without Blake Bortles. So it definitely can go in that direction. And now it's just Justin Holman's time to kind of lead that campaign and see what Tyler Harris and Bo Schneider can do behind him.
I think it's an exciting time. Definitely for UCF. There's been a lot of exciting times, and it just keeps building, like you've said. So besides playing quarterback in Poland, you're also a bit of an entrepreneur. What's the businessman Kyle Israel up to these days?
I was in the restaurant industry for a while, decided to make the move to Russia, which kind of brought me out of that. But I've just joined a part of a team. I'm going to be the operating partner and assistant director of franchise development for a new fast casual franchise here in Central Florida. It's called Little Greek. We have 17 stores in Tampa right now. We have 4 in Austin, Texas, and we have 3 more in Arkansas. But I'm going to be a part of the team developing the 20 to 25 stores here initially in Central Florida. And it's basically a Chipotle style as far as the way that you order, but Greek. And American influenced Greek. Very healthy, very fast service. Everything's made to order. And the stores in Tampa, all stores actually, all 26, have done very, very well. And I'm excited about the future of that. So I'm going to go play in Poland. I'm a part of a team that's incredible because they're allowing me to go play football in Poland in kind of a crucial time. But I had signed this contract back in November before I joined them. So they're going to allow me to go over there. I'm going to stay in touch while we're building our first store, which is going to be in Waterford Lakes Town Center. And that'll be opening end of May, early June. Will be the first kind of store here in Central Florida. And then over the next 5-7 years, we're going to develop all 25 stores here. And then I want to join the corporate side and see if I can't be a part of the team that's developing these franchises nationally and internationally. So that's kind of my plan. I really am in a good situation right now to be doing what I love and playing football, having one more opportunity to kind of travel and live that lifestyle. But then I can draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this aspect of playing, Kyle, for you is over, and let's really dig in and make this franchise successful. So that's the direction that I'm heading in.
That's a good thing because a lot of players, they don't have their next choice of career figured out and what they want to do when the football time ends, because it always ends for everybody. You can't play football forever, and that's great that you had the vision to look ahead and see, that you could do something else as well. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'm going to be listening every week now.
All right. Well, we will follow Kyle Israel and see, if we can find out what's going on over there. I've looked at the website a little bit, but it's not a lot of it is in English, so I'm going to have to maybe find somebody that speaks some Polish or something to help us out with finding out what's going on over there with Kyle.
Do they have any sort of fantasy league you can play with Polish
I don't know, but I want Kyle on my fantasy league.
There you go.
I'll try to get a hold of him and see. So that moves us along. We got a letter this week.
There's a song in this somewhere, Cards and Letters from People You Don't Even Know.
Sure.
Who sang that?
I don't know.
Oh, here we're going to get in trouble again with that. Peaches and Herb.
Was it Peaches and Herb again?
Jim Croce. Oh,
I like Jim Croce.
Yeah. Wasn't that one of his songs?
I don't know. Sure. Anyway, so Jim writes us this week about subject basketball. I'm not making fun of this. I'm actually, I want to talk about this a little bit. Jim is upset with us. He said that he would appreciate some additional basketball commentary and feedback during the season. I'm open to both pro and con, but have been disappointed with the lack of coverage. Well, Jim, no excuses, but...
All right, Donnie.
Yeah.
Coach. All right, Coach. Do you have a concussion? No.
I don't know.
Justin
McBride came down on my head a little hard.
I would answer this question by reading the first paragraph of the UCF media release on UCF's last game and why basketball may not be generating as much coverage, especially when you're talking about football recruiting day. The UCF men's basketball team dropped its 6th straight American Athletic Conference contest Saturday, falling on the road to East Carolina by a score of 67-49. That drops the Knights to 2-9 in the AAC, 9-13 overall. It seems to answer why it's not leading the Nightline podcast. If there was
more to talk about basketball that was positive, because I would like to stay positive instead of being negative. I do not want, I never have, and I never will on this show be just a negative spin on things. I just won't.
So you don't want me to mention that the Pirates used a 17-4 run to end the first half?
Well,
you don't want me to mention
that's fine, but we're not going to, I don't think that there's a lot of positive things to talk about UCF basketball, men's basketball at this time. So we're going to report the scores, the news, anything that could happen to be exciting from there. And when we hear something or we see something, we'll talk about it more. I mean, but it's just, there's not a lot to talk about. This season, as far as I'm concerned, is lost. We have an opportunity this week to
South
play
Florida,
to play
the hated
USF.
Cows from Tampa come
Right,
to town
yeah.
on Wednesday at the CFE Arena. By the way, when you check the AAC standings, they're below us. So there's some bragging rights.
Yeah, so we better win that one. If we don't, that's really going to put a negative spin to the entire season. If you can win one game out of all of these, that would be the one to do. Not that I don't love all these guys that are playing, and Donnie Jones, I like him. I've said that. But we need to have a better product. When we have a better product, we'll have better commentary on it. That's it.
Keep those cards and letters coming from people we don't even know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate that. All right, the women's basketball also, they lost this week to SMU 70-60.
By the way, it was Glenn Campbell. It wasn't even Jim Croce.
Okay, whatever.
I'm not good on
It
this
doesn't matter.
with the talent on cards and letters from people you don't even know. Good news for former UCF football players invited to the NFL Combine. Wide receiver Rennell Hall and Brashad Perriman, defensive backs Clayton Gathers, Jacoby Glenn. They will be in Indianapolis February 17th to the 23rd. Good exposure for the Knights on NFL Network, which goes wall-to-wall. Good extension of the brand. Lost amidst all of the football signing day and the recruiting class, there was another signing day, a national signing day in one of our sports.
Yeah, men's soccer had their national signing day the other day, and they picked up 3 players. Small class, but I don't know how many they normally do. So we'll just go with these 3. Dre Diaz, Brandon Rennie, and Andreas Steininger.
Points for you. Good on the pronunciation.
I don't
test.
know. I don't know if I got it right, but one from Atlanta, Georgia. The other one's from Minnesota, and the other one is from Norway. There, he has a little Steininger from Norway. So,
UCF softball off to a 4-0 start. Preseason pick to win the AAC. They swept the UCF Invitational midweek game at South Carolina.
all right, and this week as well, on Tuesday, we will be at Baseball Media Day, and we will be bringing you a UCF Nightline overtime from the campus of UCF.
Overtime.
Yeah, I need to have somebody, if anybody does voiceovers out there, you can call us at 407-205-7427 and let us know about that. Anyway, call and leave your questions, all that stuff. This has been episode number 29, and we are out of here. We will see you next week, but we will see you on Overtime on Tuesday night.
UCF, charge on to the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the heart. Victory is our cry. BSETORY. Tonight our lights will shine. UCF, lights. UCF, lights.